Hello, hello.
Hello there.
We're back.
Cut.
Yeah. We are back, and I was going to say better than ever, but one of us is sick, so...
I was sick for a while, and then I gave it to you.
Yeah, you just got over a cold, and then you sent it to me. So thank you so much for that.
Well, enjoy.
I'm not enjoying it.
You're going to get a lot of phlegm.
I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
Yeah, not... Wow.
11.
Not a fun time. But we're back in action. And we're ready for a good time. I'm excited about this episode.
Sorry, I was going to make an innuendo there, but...
Please do.
We're back in action and ready for a good time.
Sorry. Yeah, no. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Are we?
Oh, man. We are taking a detour across the pond for today's episode. And we are talking about some...
Uzbekistan.
Yeah. Nailed it. How did you know?
Yeah. I could just tell.
That's crazy. No, we are talking about a place that is almost as foreign as Uzbekistan. We're talking about a little place just outside of Liverpool. So, a little background on...
I've been to Liverpool.
You have.
Right.
I have too. And that's what I was...
Different times.
Very different times.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that's what kind of led us to this episode, is one of my friends in Liverpool had shared this post on her Facebook about this like local legend spot.
Yeah.
And I was just mindlessly scrolling my Facebook, and it caught my eye. The picture caught my eye because I was like, oh, I've been there. I've been on this walk on this hill. And I scrolled back up and started to read it, and it was all about all of the folklore associated with this place. And I was like, whoa. What do you mean?
Nobody told me about this.
Because I went through this exact place that we're going to talk about completely unprompted. Like, I had no prior knowledge. I had no history on where I was. I just knew I was walking through this cool, like, creepy feeling park on a rainy day.
That's what I was going to say. Did you feel anything when you were there in person?
So I was kind of saying this to Jamie before we got started here, is that when I went, one of my friends that I was with was saying that he thought there was, like, some sort of witchcraft or, like, occult background to this, but he never went into any detail. He was like, oh, it's just something that we all kind of talk about. And I was like, oh, cool, didn't think anything of it. But the place definitely had a vibe about it. And I associated that with it just being...
It's England.
Exactly. Like, you're in an old place, surrounded by history. It's eerie. It was rainy the day that we were there, like, foggy. So I just assumed that I was just kind of picking up on the general vibe of the area. However, there is a lot more to this place than meets the eye. So today we are taking ourselves over to just outside of Liverpool. We're going to a place called the Wirral. Right close to the Merseyside. We are talking about a little spot called Bidston Hill, which is a lovely area, but it is much more than a pretty walking spot in local folklore. Mm-hmm. Bidston... Oh, wow. Let me try that one again. Bidston Hill has a rich background of different legends, different ghost stories, occult imagery, strange sightings, and mysterious carvings that blend ancient belief, Victorian-era stories, and modern-era tales to give a lot of cryptic and supernatural legends to the area. And with that, I think the best thing to do is really jump right in.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Jane, and this is Creeps and Coffee,
a show where we talk about the dark parts of the world around us.
Cryptids, conspiracies, things that go bump in the night,
and the crimes behind the scariest creatures of all, humans.
Join us as we take a look at the stories sure to give you the creeps.
Pull up a seat, grab a coffee,
and let's have a chat.
There is quite literally so much folklore that this could be a 2 or 3 part episode.
Yeah.
There's so many bits and pieces, and I feel like that's kind of a common thing across not just the UK but European history in general. Is there's so many different themes to it. I think I kind of mentioned this when we were talking about the Hellfire Club and with Loftus Hall and the similarities there. I think there's a lot of kind of imagery and general aspects of these folkloric stories that you can see across the culture as a whole, because a lot of it with folklore is just lessons, right? So a lot of these stories get kind of shaped to tell or teach a lesson. Shit, Jamie's yawning. I'll go fuck myself.
Sorry. I'm listening, I swear.
But they try to teach this lesson through what is known to the locals in the area, right? So going back to what I was saying about the Hellfire Club and Loftus Hall, this idea of the cloven hoof stranger, it being a devilish thing over a card game, a stranger walks in. Very, very similar parts of the story, but with its own twist locally, right? And Bidston Hill and the stories behind that are no different in that case.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cryptic associations with Bidston Hill, and you will all be happy to know that there is very little genuine historical significance to these things. If you look at historical records for the Wirral, like Liverpool surrounding areas, there is not a lot of genuine record behind a lot of these stories. That doesn't mean that they didn't happen, but it just means that these need to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt and looked at as legend, not necessarily anything.
No, thank you.
Okay. Not necessarily anything purely concrete. But still very, very interesting, very, very relevant to the area.
And it's fun.
And very relevant to the Merseyside itself. And it's fun, exactly. I think what adds to the excitement of going to places like this is legend and folklore. So Bidston Hill, even me going there not knowing what the background was, I thought it was a beautiful place to be. I thought it had a very interesting background to it, a very cool vibe about it. Spooky, albeit, but cool. And I am just excited to really dive into the different aspects of it that give it that feeling, and to take a little bit more of a look into what the community of the Wirral experiences when they're around Bidston Hill. So with that, I think we should jump in with some ghosts and some hauntings. What do you think, James?
Yeah. That's why I'm here.
Perfect.
You think I'm here for the history? No.
Never. So, looking at ghosts and hauntings specifically, there's 2 very prominent ghost stories that come out of Bidston Hill. There's one of the Phantom Miller, and there's one of a man named Richard Tilley. So, more broadly, there's more local accounts talking about shadowy figures and ghostly footsteps, hearing whispers, and having...
I was going to say, on my list, I just wrote ghostly apparitions.
Yeah, so...
there's a bunch of them.
It is also very close by to quite a big gravesite in Bidston, like in the Bidston neighborhood. Bidston itself also very haunted. It was part of the neighborhood. Well, there was a lot of areas around there that were not treated very nicely during the war.
Uh-oh.
But there's a particular street in Bidston where half of the homes are original Victorian era houses and half of the homes are rebuilt from the 40s and into modernity. And that's because it was bombed during World War II.
Oh.
So you can see which houses were affected by the bombing, where the damage was. So it's a very cool area to be in. And hearing about all of these things at Bidston Hill just made it all the more solidified that it is a place of local legend. So we are going to jump in with the legend of Richard Tilley, because, like I said, that's one of the most famous ghost stories to come directly from the area, but it's also one of the darker pieces of folklore that's attached to Bidston Hill, so I thought it would be kind of interesting to start there. To be fair, there's also not really a lot of positive ghost stories or supernatural interactions that have come out of it, but it's still a good place to start. So,
yeah.
Again, there's no solid historical record that proves that Richard Tilley was a real person, but this is a story that has circulated in world ghost lore for decades. So the way that it's commonly presented is that Richard Tilley lived in or around Bidston several centuries ago. He's often placed vaguely sometime in the late 18th or early 19th century. He was described as a deeply troubled and violent man, sometimes, depending on who's telling the story, said to have been involved in occult practices.
Like Satanism?
The story basically claims that Richard Tilley murdered a young woman. In some versions of the story, it was a local girl. In others, it was his lover. In others, it was his wife. Basically, it was an innocent woman. Regardless.
Man murders woman?
Yeah, shocker.
Who would have thought?
Shocking, I know. It's often described as a killing that was ritualistic in nature. Later embellishments suggested that it was a satanic killing.
I saw that.
That Richard Tilley was a Satanist carrying out ceremonies, possibly near the windmill that's on Bidston Hill, which we'll talk about the windmill after. But some other versions say that he attempted to summon dark forces for power or immortality, so going back to those occult practices. But the more general one, and actually this is one that I heard when I was in Bidston, but it wasn't associated with the hill, it was just him. They basically just say that he was a cruel man whose violence kind of stained not just the hill but the whole area with evil. So the most persistent part of the legend, and the thing that was most prominent, and this was the part that I heard about, concerned his burial. So after his crimes came to light, after they found out about the fact that he had murdered this woman, in some versions he was executed, in some versions he just died. It just kind of, again, the local lore depends on who you're asking. Locals were said to be so fearful of him that they buried him in unconsecrated ground on Bidston Hill rather than in a churchyard, which would have been a big deal, right? Everyone, especially in an area that's so predominantly Catholic or religious, to not be buried in a churchyard was a huge sign that you were not welcomed. So the grave was apparently marked only by a simple stone. Sometimes it's described as flat and weathered. Other times they say that it was kind of hidden among the trees near the windmill at the top of Bidston Hill, because they believed that holy ground would not contain him. They believed he was so evil, so satanic, had so much power that the holy ground of a churchyard would do nothing. Now, if you look at the haunting aspect of it, the legend says that on moonlit nights, particularly during a full moon, this is not a werewolf story, though we will get to one of those, but particularly during a full moon, the spirit of Richard Tilley rises from his grave on Bidston Hill. people have reported seeing a tall, shadowy male figure standing near the windmill, accompanied by sudden drops in temperature, a feeling of being watched, and the sound of almost like low murmuring or chanting carried on the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will say that he has appeared as like a dark silhouette, the very stereotypical, like, oh, just a shadowy figure with indistinct features. Others, interestingly, describe seeing glowing or like unnaturally reflective eyes, not like an animal kind of catching the light, but unnaturally reflective. More dramatic tellings of the story say that he tries to follow people who are walking alone off the hill, but that he vanishes before reaching the road, as if he like can't leave the hill.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to this? Again, the important part is there is no verified historical record of a Richard Tilley, particularly a murderer named Richard Tilley tied to Bidston Hill.
I also heard that he was sighted with black dogs. Like in the distance.
That they do talk a lot about seeing black dogs on the hill in general. So I think somewhere along the way, again, when there's so many stories to tie in, I think those wires got crossed. But it wouldn't surprise me for there to be a dark figure with black dogs, right?
Is he the guy that they call the zombie?
I think so.
Why do they call him a zombie if he's just a ghost?
Great question. I think because he...
I was going to say, I would have expected a zombie figure.
No, I think it's just...
Not like a ghostly apparition.
I think it's a matter of him, like that, the ground not being able to contain him, and it being like his spirit seems so alive that it's almost, you know what I mean? It's almost zombified him, if that makes sense. Yeah, not...
Maybe the glowing eyes didn't help.
Yeah, no, that definitely wouldn't help. But yeah, that's like the kind of jump between zombie and his side of things. Local historians generally believe that, obviously, this story has kind of just been amplified by ghost walks and oral storytelling that happens around the world. I also want to clarify, I'm sick right now. I am not saying the world... The Whirl is the area that we're in. WIRRAL.
Oh.
The Whirl. I
gotcha.
I heard it as I was talking, and I was like, I need people who are not familiar to know that that's Whirl.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not what I heard either.
So clarifying.
Perfect.
But yeah, so also the general features of Bidston Hill, there's the windmill, which we're going to talk about right now. There's ancient carvings in the sandstone. There's World War II tunnels all over Liverpool. Hey,
I'm going to talk about both.
There we go. But there's the general isolation of it being like a wooded hill. So it's the perfect atmosphere for stories like this to flourish. So it's very possible that the name was attached later. They just kind of picked a name to give an already existing, like, quote-unquote haunted hill story, a focal character that it could be latched onto. The legend seemed to stick because there was a Victorian era fascination with spiritualism, coupled with, move on a few decades, or move on a while, and you've got the satanic panic storytelling of the 70s and 80s. A myth like the myth of Richard Tilley ties in perfectly. Especially when you add in an extra level that's like a key to old British folklore, which is old windmill folklore. And windmills come up a lot in British ghost history. So we're going to talk about that right now.
And in Frankenstein.
Yes. The Phantom Miller of the Bidston Windmill.
I don't know that
it's
story.
My favorite one because it's the closest to reality, I feel. Again, like the Richard Tilley story, it's not confirmed history, but it's one of the most enduring ghost stories that's connected to Bidston Hill. And it's as realistic as a ghost story can be, if that makes sense. I think specifically because the windmill is still standing. And being able to tie a story to a real, visible place that it's like, it's tangible. I've touched it. I went right up, I have a thing, if you guys don't know, about...
What about touching things?
Touching historical things.
Caitlin likes to touch things, you heard it here
It's
first.
true. I actually almost got in trouble for it in Liverpool because I was at the Titanic Museum. And they had a few artifacts that were exposed.
Caitlin!
With big signs saying, please do not touch.
And you touched?
I had a lookout. But anyway, all that to say, I have a thing about touching historical sites. The Bidston Windmill is no exception. So again, having that tangible thing where you can, like, it's not just ruins. It's not like a castle where you're like, yeah, I can imagine this thing being here and all of these regal stories coming from it. You can touch the windmill. You can see where it stood originally. You can kind of get the vibe from it. So it makes it a lot more accessible of a story. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So to give you the setting, I will post on Instagram, I will post the pictures of the Bidston Windmill and of me touching it. Because
nice.
Sick. But it was built in the late 18th century. And it was there to grind corn. So, like I said, the windmills in British folklore often gather ghost stories. If you think about them as these isolated structures.
Brief intermission while Caitlin is having a baby break. I found a thing about fairies on there, which I thought was really cool. Sort of paranormal, I guess. But they're called, the local traditional stories call them poldies, I think, which are identified as fairies or nature spirits that are protected from the woodlands, and they protect nature from human destruction. And so children are always warned to avoid the woods and come home before it gets dark, because that's when the poldies arrive. There's also a fairy tree. It's an ancient elder tree supposedly on the hill that has been traditionally regarded by locals as a fairy tree, or something like that.
Okay, so if you think about the windmill itself, like the idea of an old windmill, not like the modern like windmill farm things, but a genuine old windmill. It's an isolated structure. It's this big like creaking mechanism, and it's dangerous machinery. So there's lots of opportunity for not necessarily nefarious, but like spooky things to come from it. So, yeah. The miller's death. The story says that one of the millers, there's not always an association of who this miller was, but just one of the men's one of the one of the men that was working the mill, supposedly he met quite a violent and tragic end while he was working the sails.
It's not funny anymore.
No, it's not, and I felt bad for laughing when I did, because I was like, I know what's coming. So there's two versions of how this man died. So the most dramatic, and also probably the most common because it's the most dramatic version to tell, claims that the miller was struck by one of the turning sails during high wind and was either thrown violently from the structure or instantly decapitated.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So, I mean, think about it. Like, working a machine like a windmill in the 18th century, it was a scary thing. There was no safety procedure. It was risky. So, locals say that in that version, the accident was so sudden and brutal that his spirit was never at rest and it was never able to leave, which would be understandable. In the second version of the story, and I say less brutal, but it's just because he doesn't get decapitated in it. It's not any better. The other version says basically that he fell from the upper platform while he was adjusting the machinery, and he died on the hill below. And his body was found the next morning at dawn. So, talking about the haunting itself, people who walk near the windmill at dusk, which, first of all, again, I've been here. I wasn't even there. I was there like late afternoon. That was freaky enough, and I didn't even know the background. I don't know why you would walk through Bidston Hill at dusk. Also, not to shit on the Whirl, it's not a place that's unknown for crime.
Oh.
There's a pretty high crime rate in this area.
So maybe don't be doing that.
Maybe let's not walk around at dusk. I don't know. Just saying. But people who were walking near the windmill at dusk have reported, again, a shadowy figure standing near the mill doors. The faint sound of grinding mechanisms when the windmill was no longer operational. And, like, one look at this thing, you can see that it is no longer operational. It's not. It just looks old.
Yeah.
They say that they can smell grain or dust still in the air. And then that as they're standing there, there will be sudden gusts of wind when the air was otherwise calm. I mean, you're in the UK, sudden gusts of wind are not uncommon, but they're not going to come completely out of nowhere. Some say that the figure appears as a man in old-fashioned work clothes, very stereotypical, with the cap pulled low. Others describe only a dark outline against the sky. So it's very easy to get him confused with the legend of Richard Tilley, whatever figure they're seeing walking around. But the most chilling detail in some tellings, which is why this kind of jumped out at me as the story, is that there's kind of rules, and he's kind of looked at as a telling figure, if that makes sense. So it's said that if you see him facing the mill, you're safe, and if you see him facing you, you have to leave the hill, because something's gonna happen.
Ugh.
Luckily, I did not see him, but I did touch that mill. I sure did push myself up against that mill, so...
Right.
Again, why I think this story took hold the way that it has is that windmills were dangerous workplaces. Fatal accidents were not uncommon. There was no safety procedures. And even though there's no confirmed record of a decapitation at the Bidston windmill, it wouldn't have been surprising if someone had died there. And
God, they're still dangerous.
well, exactly. And the records from the 18th century, it's not uncommon for...
Hey, Pa died, by the way, on the windmill.
Exactly. It's not uncommon for shit like that to get lost.
I guess they're British. Papa died on the windmill today.
They're Scouse. They're not quite that posh.
I don't know how to do that
Not
one.
quite that posh.
Papa! I don't know how to do that one.
But when you add all of those things together, with the exposed hilltop, with the way the wind whistles around the structure, the mechanical groans that the old mills are going to make in strong weather, and the lonely silhouette at sunset, it's pretty easy to see how imagination can fill in the rest and come up with a pretty intense legend. Now it's a story that's often mentioned during local ghost walks. Some visitors say that they feel watched near the windmill after dark, even though they aren't necessarily seeing a figure, that they feel uneasy when standing nearby, and that they feel a strange heaviness in the air during full moons, which again goes back to the Richard Tilley story. And again, not werewolves, but we are going to talk about werewolves, but this full moon thing keeps coming back.
Yeah.
And of course, skeptics point out that standing on a windswept hill at night beside a centuries-old windmill is going to make you feel a type of way. But there again, it's not necessarily about if it's a historical thing, like if it genuinely happened or not. It's about the general aura of the area, if that makes sense. So, kind of goes off of that. Do you have anything you want to jump into, or do you want me to do my next one?
I got a whole bunch, yeah. One of the... Do you bring up the thing that we saw on Facebook at all about the Williams family? Well, that one is more true crimey, but that one said that it was some of the most gruesome murders of the 19th century. The 5 members of the Williams family, 4 of them were murdered by the dad.
I saw that their gravesite, their crypt.
Right. Yeah, apparently he murdered his wife and their children, and they were all buried in the cellar next to the hill.
Yes. I do know this story. It's all coming back to me now.
Yeah, and apparently, obviously, when the police found them murdered and buried, they were like, okay, well, it was probably the husband. Where is he? Because he got away. Apparently, he had been living under multiple different aliases for years.
Yes.
And he was suspected of killing a previous wife, and some people say he's similar to Jack the Ripper. Not that he is, but same sort of vibe. Also, yeah, more ghostly ones, technically, because you were talking about ghostly stuff. Yeah. Well, I know. Let me read my... Let me pull out my statistic... I don't know.
Yes.
Yes, I am. Oh, points on. I was just gonna say, I don't know if this is what you were gonna say, but there was sightings. One woman saw, she was out walking her dog, and she saw a wolf. Do you know? Was this what you were gonna do?
I don't believe so. It might be.
Well, the wolf was trying to attack her dog, and she was freaking out. And apparently, a medieval man appeared out of nowhere and called to the wolf, and the wolf went back to him, and he immediately vanished, and so did the wolf.
How valiant.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Would shit myself
why.
for so many reasons. Can you imagine?
No. A real wolf alone is scary.
That's what I mean. Like, initially, you're fending off a wolf attack, and then you're like, oh, ghost wolf, called by ghost medieval man. Like, how do you just...
And were you gonna talk at all about the cat?
I think I had a small note about it, but you seem very excited about the cat.
I don't have much about the cat, but there's a cat sighting, but it's a spooky cat sighting. Apparently, in 2003, there were several reports made to the police that there was a large tawny cat, and I think tawny's like what? Like orange? Or like a tabby?
Kind of like a brownie orange.
Like a burger?
Like a burger, but more ginger.
But yeah, apparently there was a large cat, and it wasn't Burger. Burger was not alive yet. Terrorizing people around this hill, and the police sent a wildlife officer to investigate. There was no proof of anything, though.
Interesting.
They couldn't find anything.
Interesting because, and this could be a completely different episode, so...
Because it's either a wild cat, or a really big house cat that got out, or a ghost.
Well, so here's the thing. Again, this could be another episode, because this is a whole other phenomenon, but it's interesting because there's a lot of, particularly in England, a lot of large black cat sightings all over the place. Where again, like, people will see these, like, giant cats, almost like panthers, which are obviously not native to the UK, and then wildlife officers will go and investigate, and there will be no sign of anything. So it's interesting that there's, like, a Liverpool version of that. To kind of tie into the paranormal aspect of things, going back to Richard Tilley, I want to talk about some more, like, occultist legends that are tied to Bidston Hill. Again, like Richard Tilley, like the Phantom Miller, it is not supported by historical records, but it is one of the more unsettling myths of the hill. So I want to talk about Oliver Milton. So the story places an ambitious young man named Oliver Milton sometime, again, in the 18th or 19th century. He's described as an intelligent but restless young man. Basically the type of guy...
So he had ADHD.
Pretty much. He was basically the type of guy that was dissatisfied with where he was in his life and obsessed with this idea of gaining wealth and power and, like, forbidden knowledge. So your typical young man. Some versions say that he was already dabbling in occult books and that sort of lifestyle. Other versions say that he was mocked or dismissed by society and turned to darker forces out of desperation. Like, he had nowhere else to go, so he was asking anyone who would help him. So on Bidston Hill, there are a lot of sandstone rocks, and there are a lot of natural sandstone outcrops that are marked with carvings. Some are ancient carvings, some are later graffiti, and according to the legend, Oliver Milton chose one of these rocks as the site of a particular ritual. So on one moonlit night, he climbed the hill alone, and he brought with him candles, a book of incantations, and a piece of chalk or a blade to mark symbols into the stone. Allegedly, he carved a circle into the rock and called upon who else but the big man, Lucifer himself, and he offered his soul in exchange for success. He wanted to show everybody up, and he was willing to do whatever it took to be successful, to be more than he thought he could be. Some versions say, ooh, the air grew unnaturally still. Some say a violent wind tore across the hill. And in the most dramatic...
Yeah, it's England.
Exactly. And in the most dramatic versions of this tale, a dark figure appeared within the circle. So Oliver is said to have made a deal with the devil. And like all of these stories, soon after his life began to change. He had money, he had influence, he had romantic success, depending on the version of the tale, whatever kind of success he was after.
And what exactly incantations did he do?
Just out of curiosity, does anybody know where I can find...
Do you have a copy of that?
But the bargain, as it always does when making a deal with the devil, it came at a cost. And within quite a short amount of time, misfortune began to seep into his life. So he became paranoid. He claimed that something was following him. He was often heard speaking to someone that other people couldn't see.
I already do all these things, you're fine.
Exactly, you're good. Makes a lot of sense. Again, shouldn't be laughing because I'm about to say a very unfortunate part of the story. But
right, sorry.
Eventually, Oliver Milton was found dead. Either...
Killed himself?
Well, depending on the version of the story, it's either by suicide, mysterious accident, or sudden illness. Some say his body was discovered near the actual rock where he performed the ritual on the hill. So the rock itself, where people say this happened, is sometimes referred to as the cursed spot. A lot of visitors who see it will claim that they feel dizzy or uneasy when they're standing near certain carvings. They'll hear whispers in the wind. They'll see shadow movement out of the corner of their eye. And then there's also a little flourish that people will say that on certain nights, if you stand within the carved circle and speak your desire aloud, the wind will answer. This is probably just the world breeze doing what it does. Again, you're in the UK, you're by the Mersey River, it's windy, but it all plays into the folklore, right? The reality of this legend is there is no verified record of an Oliver Milton tied to Bidston Hill or any document. And here's the thing. There's no documented satanic ritual that took place at Bidston Hill. Are there a lot of documented satanic rituals? No. That doesn't mean that satanic...
Doesn't mean they don't happen.
That doesn't mean that satanic rituals aren't a thing. They very obviously are. However, this goes back to what we were saying with Richard Tilley. A lot of it being inspired by the real ancient carvings on the hill. There are genuine, like I've seen them, there are genuine carvings in the sandstone. But that Victorian fascination with spiritualism tied in with the satanic panic of the 70s and 80s amplifies it from a story that most likely came out of the 20th century. Yes.
Teacher. I was just gonna say, some of the carvings that I saw were saying that some of them were more modern, like pagan ones, celebrating spring or the like fall harvest.
Totally.
Some of them were like mummers carvings. Some of them were like Norse gods and goddesses, like just like sun and moon prayers, which are cool and occult, but not scary.
No, and like I said, the carvings themselves are genuine. Like, some of them are possibly medieval, possibly earlier. Some of them are more modern. Like, there's people now who are marking themselves, like marking their names and their initials in sandstone. Those carvings are there, but there's no way of knowing what the true meaning is. But yeah, it's not necessarily scary. It's just again, the way that people carve their name into trees. So yeah, that there's a lot of connection to those carvings. So my next story that I want to jump into from Bidston Hill is what I've been alluding to before, and it's the werewolf of Bidston Hill.
I've heard of this guy.
We see the full moon come up in a lot of these stories, and this is no different. And the werewolf of Bidston Hill is probably one of the strangest, and honestly, one of the saddest legends that are connected to the hill. So, unlike a lot of werewolf stories that are purely like this monstrous, scary werewolf, this one has like a kind of tragic, half folkloric tone, if that makes sense. Again, there's no historical evidence behind it. It's folklore. But the story basically goes that sometime in the 18th century, we don't really ever get a firm date, but sometime in the 18th century, a miller, sometimes the same miller that's tied to the Phantom Miller story, sometimes not, but basically a miller that worked at the windmill, is said to have fathered an illegitimate son. Either because he was ashamed of the child for being illegitimate, or simply unable to care for him because he was not making a lot of money, the boy was abandoned on or around Bidston Hill. Some versions kind of soften the story and say that the child was simply like neglected and left to roam freely while the adults worked. But the most common version of the story is that he was fully abandoned, and that the boy survived alone on the hill. The story goes that he learned to hide in the woods and the sandstone caves. He scavenged and stole food from the surrounding farms and avoided people whenever possible because he had no sense of social interaction. Over time, doing this, he became feral. He was unkempt, he was silent, and he learned to move quickly through the brush and the stone. This is when livestock in the surrounding area began turning up injured or dead. Sheep were found with torn throats, chickens disappeared, and villagers began talking about there being a beast on the hill. Because again, too, modern day, there's obviously houses and like stuff surrounding Bidston Hill, but in the 18th century it would have been all farmland, right? So one night, a farmer claimed to see a hunched, wolf-like figure running upright along the ridge. Another said they saw glowing eyes in the brush near the windmill. So again, the glowing eyes are, is it the werewolf? Is it Richard Tilley? Is it something else? Is it the cat? Is it something different altogether? All of these things.
Speaking of cat.
The shape was described as tall but bent, kind of like a hunch, covered in matted hair, moving unnaturally fast, and letting out howls that echoed across the hill. And obviously everyone freaked the fuck out. A group of men supposedly gathered with lanterns and weapons to hunt the creature, kind of like that scene in Beauty and the Beast where Gaston is leading the crowd with their pitchforks.
Kill the beast!
Exactly.
That unlocked a memory.
But here, in the sad side of it, is that when they cornered this beast among the rocks, the beast stood upright, and they saw that it wasn't a wolf, it wasn't a beast, it was a human boy who was filthy, starving, and terrified. In some versions of the story, he tried to attack the villagers. In others, he simply just howled in panic. He didn't know what to do. So, rather than kill him, the villagers chose to exile him, which I feel like he was already pretty exiled, so...
Yeah, he's a werewolf.
Yeah. Exactly.
You just let him go home.
Exactly. They were just like, oh, my bad. Some stories say that he was driven off the hill and never seen again. Others claim that he fled deeper into the countryside. But this is the part of the story where that supernatural element starts to creep back in. After his disappearance, howling was still heard on full moon nights, Again, we're back to that full moon, but this time it is a werewolf. Sheep were still turning up dead, inexplicably, and there were still shadows that were moving along the ridge. So walkers on Bidston Hill have sometimes reported hearing distant howls when there are no dogs nearby, visibly at least. They've reported seeing a large hunched shadow at the tree line, and again feeling watched on foggy evenings. So it's hard to attribute that feeling of being watched to a specific story, because it's been tied into basically all of these so far. And yeah, in the dramatic retellings of the story, the wild boy became something more. This creature that was cursed by abandonment and transformed into this werewolf-like thing that was bound to the hill. So if we're looking at the possible kind of origins of the story, it likely comes from a mix of a bunch of different things. You're in the rural area. There's a lot of fear about livestock killings. That's why we have stories of like the chupacabra, of even cattle mutilation, stories like that, which we'll also talk about UFOs. But there's folklore traditions of wild men living in forests, which are very common. There are a good amount of British werewolf myths. They're obviously less common than in continental Europe, but they are still present. And again, that isolated, windswept feel of Bidston Hill itself. So all of it ties into this common folkloric theme of the abandoned feral child, which is just basically a comment on society's rejection and how it creates the monster that it fears all along. So what's interesting about this werewolf story is that it's not a cursed bite from a wolf. It's not dark magic that turned him into anything. It's neglect, it's isolation, and it's that line between...
Way sadder.
Yeah, well, it's that thin line between humanity and becoming a beast, right? Which makes it feel oddly modern for a legend, but really tugs at the heartstrings. So that is the Werewolf of Bidston Hill. And really that's where my stories end and my legends kind of end. I have a little bit more to say about some more like witchcraft associated with the hill, and Jamie's going to talk about some UFO stuff with the hill, but that's kind of where the legends themselves come to rest.
I mean, I was also just, I can do a blurb and say I thought it was interesting about the secret tunnels and how there used to be like air raid shelters and stuff underneath.
Yeah.
I think while that isn't in itself like paranormal, I think that that's really cool, and they unfortunately sealed them off so that you can't go in them, but boy would I want to.
But they open them up around Halloween every year and do guided walking tours through them.
Oh! They should do a haunted house in one of them. That would be scary.
That'd be fucking sick. Beautiful. Yeah, so my kind of final input is about witchcraft and the associations, because I think it's a very British thing looking at witchcraft. And Bidston Hill's witchcraft associations are less about like documented witch trials or like historical witches at the place, and more about the atmosphere and the symbolism of the hill itself. And going back to the way that folklore kind of grows around these liminal places, it's one of those places that feels like it should have a coven story around it. So eventually it did.
Right.
So with the hill itself being a liminal place, British folklore has a lot of witchcraft, like witches and spirits, probably more so spirits, looking at like fairies and dwarves and all of that sort of thing, that are often tied to nature. So hilltops, sandstone, windswept landscapes, places with ancient carvings. And Bidston Hill is just ticking all those boxes.
Check.
So when you look at the hill itself, like at the top of the hill, it's above the Wirral, and you can see across the Mersey River. So like I said, now obviously there's houses and stuff around, but before that modern development, it would have felt a lot more remote and exposed, especially at night. And high places in folklore are thought of as thin places, where the boundary between worlds, spiritual and physical, is a lot weaker. Obviously, that idea alone can create the stories. We talked about the sandstone carvings.
Yep.
It has those genuine sandstone carvings. Again, some are believed to be medieval. Some of them are possibly like Norse, Irish, Celtic in origin. There's really well-known ones that are like a figure that's often interpreted as the sun goddess. There's a lot of animal forms. There's a lot of like crescent shapes like the moon. A lot of historians see these as historic maritime or devotional carvings. A lot of storytellers reinterpreted those, like Jamie was saying, into pagan symbols, ritual markings, protective sigils. And once people kind of start making those connections, it's not a big leap to imagine more rituals happening around those. So that's not to say that it didn't happen. It very likely could have. But this is...
It's really pooping on all of our points.
I know, I'm so sorry. But realistically, it's... And I'm not typically the skeptical one.
Yeah.
But there's...
Boo!
I know.
Tomato, tomato, tomato.
I know. However, that's just about the carvings.
Okay.
So, if we talk about the witch's steps, I'm all in. I'm back with you. There's a lot of local lore that refers to parts of the hill as areas where witches would meet and perform specific rituals. So not necessarily just at the carvings, particularly near certain rock formations and wooded paths, which is what my friend was talking about when we went on this walk. So I remember him pointing out the witch's steps to me. So a lot of these stories describe like hooded figures that are gathered by candlelight, more circles drawn into the sandstone, and fire seen flickering at night. And again, while there's no evidence of organized covens on Bidston Hill, there's not always going to be readily available organized evidence of these things happening. That's kind of how secret things work. They're secret.
Yeah, crazy.
And a lot of oral tradition claims that witches would use the hill for seasonal gatherings, moon rituals. Again, that full moon comes up a lot when talking about Bidston Hill. So it would be the...
It's almost like the moon's important.
Well, it's crazy. But it wouldn't be irrational to think that if people are going to meet up on a full moon, they're going to do it at the highest point, and they're going to do it when the moon is at its fullest. And then, obviously, there's the perk of there being secret meetings away from town scrutiny. You're not going to do it in the middle of town where everyone can hear your business, but you can go to the secluded area where you're very connected to nature. That veil is very thin, and you have a lot of privacy. So when there was a revival of interest kind of around the 19th century in the like mysticism side of things, and then again in the satanic occult panic era of the 70s, 80s, these stories started to come up more and more. The windmill itself, I'm going to say it again, it's spooky. It gives a spooky vibe. And windmills in folklore are often linked with superstition, with weather magic because it's being controlled by the wind, and with the kind of the symbolism of the turning of fate. So when you add full moons over the Mersey, long shadows being seen, wind howling through the wooden beams, you're writing your own coven story at this point. You're like setting the scene for the perfect witch environment. And then kind of again, the spiritualism movement. If you look at Victorian spiritualism and sort of the 20th century occult fascination, many British, I guess we can call them like witch sites, like areas where there was a lot of coven activity supposedly, they didn't gain their reputations in the Middle Ages. They came from the Victorian era when spiritualism was fashionable. These gothic ghost stories were popular. They were like people wanted to know about mediumship and psychics and all of these things. And these antiquarians at the time were romanticizing the idea of ancient pagan Britain. And then in the like 1960s to 80s, so just before the Satanic Panic and into the end of the 80s, there was really a renewed interest in Wicca and the occult themes, which probably re-energized the idea of Bidston Hill as this occult site. Mm. So it's very possible that the witchcraft association around Bidston Hill is more a product of the storytelling culture and less of like medieval reality. But again, that doesn't mean that it's not a place where that stuff does happen, especially looking into like modern claims around the area with a newfound appreciation for Wicca and pagan religions becoming more popular today in the 21st century. Some visitors today claim to see small stone circles left behind, melted candle wax near carvings, and newer symbols etched into the sandstone. So whether these are pranks, whether they're modern spiritual practices, or whether they're just random coincidences, they are reinforcing this hill's reputation as a spiritual place. And I think it's never going to go away. And that's what adds to the atmosphere of Bidston Hill in general. So yeah, while there's no historical record of these ghost stories, of werewolves, of the Phantom Miller, of witch trials on Bidston Hill, there's no historical record of named witches that are tied to the site. There's no official accounts of covens. I think the important thing to point out is that folklore doesn't require court documents.
True. I was going to say, stop pooping on my stories.
I'm just saying.
Which is interesting, though, because we don't have the same stories. I thought we were going to have all the same stories. Mine are different. I don't have any physical proof to back mine up either.
But but that's the interesting thing.
I choose to believe.
Well, you know what? As someone who was there, I choose to believe it too. That place is freaky.
So, my two are pretty quick because I found one thing and did no further research on them. And I'm sure if I did, though, I probably still wouldn't find anything because of how how niche of the topic this is.
Yeah.
But there is one supposed, according to local folklore, they found 12 members of a coven all hung from branches within a clearing upon the hill. And this happened after a local young Christian man vowed to get rid of all the witches in the area.
Which?
So that would probably have just been murder if it's true.
Correct.
And then I heard that there was a specific clearing that the witches liked to use. Not the specific witches who were hung to death, supposedly.
But witches
but a different coven of witches used that clearing as like a sacred space. And there are rumors of people hearing like laughter, loud screams, like women speaking.
Don't like that.
And it's said that if you step foot in this witch's clearing without permission, you'll die within a month.
Lucky for me, I did not step foot in that, clearly. But I know a couple people who could take a nice long walk through it. Yeah.
But apparently, it could be ghostly witches or real-life, live flesh and blood witches showing up and doing, sabbats.
Yeah.
Or stuff like that. Which is just pretty cool. Which is pretty cool. Anyway, yeah, we can talk about aliens if you want now.
Aliens.
So, did you do any research on the aliens?
I did not, because I knew that if I started doing research on aliens, I would never stop. So,
I don't have too much. There's one specific story that I'll read from, and then there's just a lot in general of people saying it's a UFO hotspot. I mean, I obviously think that makes sense. If it's like a pull for paranormal things, of course it's a pull for, extraterrestrial or supernatural things as well.
Think about it, too. It's close to the water, which is a big thing for UFOs. It used to be just farmland, which we all know is...
They love the cattle.
They love the cattle. They love a crop circle.
Yeah.
So, it makes sense.
Yeah. So, there have been lots of, one-off reports from random people saying they saw lights in the sky that were mysterious. They thought they saw flying saucers. Again, though, this is all hearsay because you can't get proof of a flying saucer unless you're the government.
Yeah.
But there was one specific story that is really interesting. What is their names? I know the daughter's name is June.
I like that name.
It's called the Bidston Hill UFO crash.
Okay.
Which is interesting. So the story goes, again, we've got no proof of this, but the story goes in 1959, July 9th at around 7:30 in the evening, a girl named June was at the top of Bidston Hill with her boyfriend Fred, who was 21, and her father. Their plan was the boyfriend was going to ask the dad for her hand in marriage, which is very cute. However, what instead happened is the boyfriend let out a cough, and at the same time, there was a really loud bang. And they were all like, ah!
I like these sound effects.
Thank you. Yeah. The dad thought there was a bomb being dropped or something.
Which is valid, given the history of the area.
So they all sort of staggered and, like, dropped down because they were scared. June goes, "Oh, what's that?" and points into the distance where all three of them... Hello. All three of them see a huge circular aircraft of some sort that has crashed down onto... It is a UFO! That's what I'm talking about!
Good job, Connor.
Into Bidston Hill and was protruding from the soil, and it was at like a 45-degree angle. It was made of grayish, shiny metal. Okay. It had two domes on top of it, which glowed faint emerald green.
Ooh.
Apparently it was about 60 feet in diameter. June immediately wants to go towards it.
Me.
Both the dad and boyfriend are like, "No, we gotta go." Fred is like, "That's a flying saucer." And the dad is like, "It's gonna explode, we gotta run." I'm paraphrasing here. And Fred
no, I
goes,
like to think that those are direct quotes.
"Hey, look, something's coming out the top of it." So the dad's still trying to pull his daughter. He says, "Screw Fred, let's run." The daughter wants to see, so she's pulling, she's looking. She sees a spindly metal machine creature with a round head and robotic jerky movements climbing out of the hatch at the top. And then another figure, described as bulbous, came waddling out from behind the craft.
Incredible description.
As well as a third robotic-like machine that was in the shape of a rugby ball with two short legs and two long arms.
Incredible.
It looked like it had an armored plate on it. So June goes, "Oh my god, they're spacemen!" That one is a direct quote. The dad says, "Yo, we gotta call the police. We gotta go." When have the police ever done with aliens?
What a bitch.
And so June is supposedly... Stupid girl. This was so me. She supposedly said, "Hey, this is Earth, welcome."
Me.
And supposedly the egg-shaped, the like circular creature...
The bulbous one?
The bulbous one turns to them and goes, "Earth is your name for this planet. Its real name is... da, 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 da," and said something that none of them understood.
It's just Welsh.
In like... Yes. They think it was like some sort of alien language.
Welsh.
So the dad finally like picks her up and like strong arms her away, and the boyfriend follows along because he's like, "Oh my god, we're being invaded by aliens, we're all gonna die." And they run away. By the time they get back, she's like, "Oh, also, we were gonna ask for your hand in marriage," and the dad's like, "Sure, get married, I don't care, we gotta call the police." By the time they reported the crash, and the police went to go look for the crash site, it was gone. Nothing there. But this all is hearsay, technically, besides these three people who said this happened. Mm-hmm. However, there was multiple reports in the local and national papers about the unexplained bang that was heard all over the world just before 8 p.m. on the Thursday night.
Interesting.
So that leads me to, like, kind of believe it, because if everybody heard that bang...
Yeah.
It really could have been. We don't know.
And you know I always believe UFO stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I thought that was fun.
It was a bummer that I was there at the top of the hill and I didn't see any UFOs.
Also, that is so funny. Hi, welcome to Earth. Girl, shut up and run.
Girl, what? They're not your friends.
They, like... I don't know, I just thought that was real funny.
That's hilarious.
Is it true? Don't know.
I think so.
I choose to believe that one, too.
That's also a very Scouse response to it, too, to, like, not be afraid, but just to be like, hey.
Welcome to Earth.
What's up?
What are you doing here?
Incredible.
Yeah, that was my UFOs.
I love it.
Thank you.
Well, you made a good point in saying, though, that, yeah, like, it's kind of the perfect place for it to land and for it to interact, so it's not unbelievable for me whatsoever.
Believe what you want?
Yeah, all that to say, despite the lack of genuine historical record, like I said, folklore doesn't need historical record. Folklore doesn't need concrete evidence to continue to be spread and continue to be passed on as legend. We wouldn't have any of the legends that we have currently if we were not focused on oral storytelling and the passing down of history that way. That's how we got most of our ancient history before we found
So just do lots of
pyramids.
oral.
I mean, that's solid advice. Fuck, that was good.
Keep up your oral, you guys.
Yeah, that's...
Oral hygiene, oral traditions, oral.
You're an icon, Jamie. I'm making a shirt that says that. But yeah, it's...
Write that down.
Write that down. It's a matter of local culture and local legend, and in terms of places I've been, the Wirral and Merseyside in general is a very, very unique place. As they will all tell you, they're Scouse, not English. They are
Right.
very proud of their heritage.
Isn't that like saying I'm Albertan, not Canadian?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. But no, it's a very interesting place. It's filled with history. There's so many stories that I could go off of. Jamie and I were talking about doing a trip this summer and talking about how, like, yeah, it'd be so cool to visit all of these places, but there's so much to look at
There's hundreds.
in just one city that
Yeah.
there's so much history to kind of look at, and the Wirral is no exception. Bidston is just one neighborhood, and it's got so much history behind it. It's insane. So it was really fun to be able to do a deep dive on a specific area like this. I'm very glad I stumbled upon that Facebook post that kind of gave us the chance to chat about this, because I think passing on those local legends is really cool, even if it's not local to us.
Yeah.
I think
Well said.
yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you for joining us on our trip down Bidston Lane.
Ha!
Ahaha. If you would like to share your own local legends, or if you have any questions or comments about today's episode, you can get in touch with us on our socials. You can contact us via email at creepsandcoffee@gmail.com. You can check out our Instagram or our Twitter at creepsandcoffee, where you can find pictures of the Bidston Windmill and whatever other pictures I have of Bidston Hill that I don't remember having, but I know that I have some. We'll post those so you can check it out.
Yep.
What else do we have? Patreon. If you would like to support our show and get a behind-the-scenes look at some of our episodes and get exclusive content in the form of an extra special bonus episode every month, you can check out our Patreon, which is patreon.com/creepsandcoffee. We appreciate each and every one of you who helps support our show, and we are very
I'll
excited.
also say, you can subscribe to the Patreon for free, too. There are just exclusive perks that you will get
Absolutely.
if you also pay.
Absolutely. You do not have to be a paid subscriber, but we would love to have you join our...
Please.
But it wouldn't hurt.
Burger had a $500 vet bill, but please.
But we are very grateful to be still doing this, still getting to chat with all of you and hearing all that you have to say. So we will be back in the not so distant future with some more deep dives on our crazy, crazy world.
See you in 2 weeks.
Bye!
Bye!
Creeps and Coffee is produced and edited by us, Kate and Jane.
Our theme music is Stuck in a Hole by Dated.
For more information on where to find them, check out the link in our show notes. And to connect with us, follow us on Instagram and Twitter @CreepsandCoffee.